you don't have any role
The first time, right?
until Heather comes back. First, as you know, did not come by its name by accident. We are all concerned that our state remains listed in the bottom tier of states. This work we have taken on is a challenge, but look around you. Each of us is here tonight because we care about New Mexico. We care about our communities, and each in our own way have turned that belief into action and have made a difference. So tonight, we have the chance to hear from people who have bold ideas about our way forward. And we want to applaud these outstanding New Mexicans who have contributed in ways in which we aspire. So by rolling up our sleeves, by pairing innovative thinking and working together, New Mexico First will continue to help lead the way in lifting New Mexico and thereby all New Mexicans. As the interim executive director for this amazing organization, I leave you tonight with a quote from President Theodore Roosevelt. "Far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." I agree, and we're doing the work worth doing. Thank you for being here with us, because we are all here after that prize. Please enjoy the program.
Fantastic organizations that include El Paso Electric and P&M, all of whom are tonight's supporters who are featured in your program. We also want to thank our friends at New Mexico PBS for helping us broadcast tonight's event live across the country on newmexicofirst.org. And for those of you who have not had a chance to text your family and friends, you can do that right now and let them know to go to the website so they can be a part of the conversation. They will be actually engaged as a part of all of this as well with respect to asking questions. And because I know my parents are watching live, hi Mom and Dad, it's great to see you. One of the easiest ways for you to engage, whether you are in the audience or watching online, is actually by way of the hashtag. And we have a special hashtag for you, and what a wonderful way to keep this in mind. Hashtag First Forum is what you want to be able to use, and we'll use that as our cue that somebody in the audience, and we'll talk about the card protocol here in just a little bit, has a chance to ask questions. So if you're online watching, go ahead and use hashtag First Forum, and we'll vet your questions appropriately. So what will we be discussing this evening? We're going to be discussing sustainable journalism and preserving the Fourth Estate. As our topic is media, we hope that everyone will join the conversation by way of Twitter, and that Twitter address is @NewMexicoFirst, and the hashtag, of course, is First Forum. Next, we'd like to turn to Dr. Valerie Romero-Leggott, our New Mexico First Board of Directors Chair. Valerie.
Well, thank you, Tom, and buenas noches. Thank you. Well, it's just before we turn this wonderful evening in our program over to our expert panel of journalists, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank several of our New Mexico leaders. So we're delighted that so many of our public officials are here tonight. We estimate that this room holds over 24 of our state legislators, cabinet secretaries, school board members, several county commissioners and city councilors, and holders of statewide offices. If you currently hold an elected or appointed office, will you please stand and let us thank you for your service? Thank you. So this is New Mexico First's 33rd anniversary. So we also want to recognize the many people who helped the organization throughout its history. So I'm going to call off several groups, and I want the audience just to ask you all to please hold your applause till the end. And also, as I call the groups, if you would please stand and remain standing. So first, if you're a current New Mexico First board member, board of directors, or staff, please stand. And if you're a board emeritus member or a former board member, please stand. If you're a sponsor, it's your turn to stand. And of course, you know, this work could not happen without the amazing facilitators, recorders, researchers, and other volunteers who help us and who've helped us throughout the history of New Mexico First. So would all former and current active volunteers please stand? Okay, well, now that we have a third of this room or half of this room standing, we can applaud and thank you all. And you know, this activity, and you know, this was an opportunity to thank everyone, as we said before, but I think is really also a way to just show how much, it just demonstrates how much New Mexico First relies on this tremendous community of people to do the important work and make a difference in the future for New Mexico. So thank you all. Over to you, Tom.
That's woven into the United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It's fitting that we're discussing this today on so many levels, not the least of which is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Soldiers fought for our country, many died. An Albuquerque resident, a news reporter, Ernie Pyle, was central to sharing the events of D-Day with the world. The New York Times actually has a very fascinating article about his life today. It's fitting to have this discussion, but it should not be a one-and-done conversation. Sustainable journalism and preserving the fourth estate is the topic that New Mexico First has been invested in through a variety of unique partnerships to identify challenges of our state's journalism sector and the smart, practical solutions offered by our state's leading journalists and the next generation of reporters. New Mexico PBS created this 5-minute video that we're about to watch to set the table for this evening's conversation. Please turn your attention to the video screens and let's get ready to talk about sustainable journalism.
History has more information been available to more people. At the same time, never has there been more bad information available to more people. New Mexicans must have solid, reliable information to make their best personal, economic, and voting decisions. The vitality of a trusted free press is as important as ever, but many unique challenges face New Mexico journalism. The digital age has fueled the desire for fast, free information. In addition to straining the traditional news business model, countless online sources from around the world challenge consumers to discern what is accurate reporting from disinformation. About 60% of Americans now get their news from social media. The landscape of trusted brand names in news is tectonically shifting, and in many New Mexico's smaller communities, relevant information is all the more difficult to access. Rural residents trust their local paper more than other sources, but rural news outlets often have smaller qualified staffs, which can make it more difficult to provide in-depth coverage. Complex issues requiring more hours and manpower are going uncovered in rural communities, and some residents living near the border with Texas, like in Las Cruces, have little choice but to get their news from Texas-based outlets. What's more, New Mexico has the highest percentage of Hispanics and Native Americans of any state. There are very few news outlets in the voice and language of those communities. Accurate information is imperative to a democracy, and ensuring New Mexicans have access to accurate information relevant to their lives is a priority of New Mexico First's work to promote a deliberative democracy in which we work together as New Mexicans to reach a consensus to create positive change for our state. So, in 2018, New Mexico First researched the state of journalism in the Land of Enchantment, then conducted a series of focus groups with scores of journalism professionals and students around the state. The journalists New Mexico First staff met with are passionate about what they do, and they have a wealth of knowledge and expertise to share with their communities and audiences each day. And they want to do more, but need additional support and investment to do so. Resources. journalists said they are asked to do more with less than ever. Along with their own daily production obligations, journalists are expected to engage with their audiences on social media to generate interest in their stories. Profitability pressures have contributed to thinning newsrooms, and managers have made the hard decision to forego equipment upgrades and even document requests to hold the budget line. Audiences want their news right now and in mass quantities, but like fast food, fast news isn't always beneficial. Trying to meet such demands can compromise fact-checking and can foster a focus on easy, less consequential stories. Government access. Despite the establishment of sunshine portals on government websites in recent years, journalists say that obtaining both documents and statements from government agencies remains a challenge. Workforce. The existing workforce, while getting older on average, needs evolving training. Participants held that one of the best ways to strengthen journalism is to support the reporters themselves, allowing them to learn new ways to report the news and the space to do more of what they do best. Veteran journalists are transitioning to public relations and communications jobs in government and the private sector, lured away by higher pay and lower pressure. Amid these challenges, many New Mexico news outlets have come up with innovative strategies to give in-depth coverage of local news. Though journalists here in the state have proven to be resourceful, there is still much work to be done to improve the condition of journalism in the state. Some of the key concrete initiatives we could undertake today to strengthen journalism in our state: foster collaboration among news outlets and communities in reporting. Journalists agreed that the benefits of collaboration outweigh the once strongly held concern over who gets the story first. By working together, they can better elevate awareness of the shared issues of multiple communities to the broader public and decision makers. Provide professional development for existing reporters in policy and advanced civics. One solution would be to fund development of policy briefs based on New Mexico First background reports, as well as briefs on the branches of government, legislative and regulatory processes, and how to obtain public information from government agencies. A journalist on the editing team would ensure that the content is useful, newsworthy, and objective. Improve media literacy for the public. Local news outlets could host community engagement workshops that present the difference between fact and opinion, identify credibly sourced material, and shed light on the editorial process. Create a legal aid fund to support the work of journalists, specifically when they must confront the challenges related to the State Inspection of Public Records Act. Support research on best practices for funding news entities and quality, locally relevant news production. Analyze for-profit, public, and nonprofit journalism models. Develop and support recruitment, training, and professional development for journalists of color and marginalized communities. It is important to recognize that good work is underway among many media outlets. It is equally important to acknowledge shortcomings and seek constructive solutions. New Mexico relies not only on a free press, but also on a highly qualified, fair, smart, and rigorous workforce of journalists. The increasing marginalization and diminished capacity of local and state journalism, coupled with the growing need to prepare the next generation of ethical, intellectually curious reporters, is critical to a healthy, deliberative democracy. Without sustainable, robust journalism, New Mexico is not likely to ascend the national rankings in the measures that matter. As important as our work is to making New Mexico first, we believe that we must have this important discussion on preserving the Fourth Estate.
Thank you, Franz Joachim, for your contribution in producing that excellent video. Franz, as you may know, is the general manager for New Mexico PBS and also a New Mexico First board member, and he is taking some amazing selfies tonight. Your selfie game is strong. I can't wait to see the hashtag First Forum being used with all those posts that you're getting. I think that's great. Panelists, if I could invite you to come to the stage this evening, we're honored to have Jean Grant lead our panel of journalists. I have had the opportunity to know Gene in a variety of circles, whether it is in his time with Heather Wilson's office or when he is on the curling ice, and I know that there's a certain term for that I am now escaping. Oh, there you go. See, his form has not changed at all. One of the reasons we finished, well, we won't talk about that. We're here to talk about sustainable journalism. But Gene is with New Mexico PBS and is the host of the news program New Mexico in Focus. He's here to lead our expert panel of journalists, which include Russell Contreras with the Associated Press, Michelle Donaldson, President and General Manager of KOB TV, Jessica Onsurez, News Director for the USA Today Network properties in Southeast New Mexico, including the Carlsbad Current Argus, Alamogordo Daily News, and the Ruidoso News. Now, after the discussion, the panel will be taking discussion and questions from you. And this is where we need you to get your program. And then in your program, there's a 3x5 card. And as a part of that, if you have a question that surfaces during the first 10 minutes of tonight's conversation, just hold the card up and we'll go ahead and find a way to get it from you. And then at that point, we'll collect all of the questions and we'll have a lightning round with Gene and the panelists a little bit later. But first, I'll turn the microphone over. So for now, ladies and gentlemen, Gene Grant.
Thank you, Tom. He's the man. He is the man. Thank you, Tom Garrity. I want to thank some folks, obviously, right off the bat. My boss is here, Franz, of course. The guys up in the back doing the live stream. We appreciate that. That's something we talk about sometimes as journalists, this idea to live stream more things, to get more knowledge about stuff out in the fifth largest state in the union. So thank you to contributing to that. Thornburg for helping fund this report. I would actually very much recommend the focus group report to read. I'm sure a lot of you have already, but to kind of circle back even after this discussion might turn out to be a bit of a different read. So interesting stuff here. So great panel. Thank you guys for all being here. I like the representation of what we've got from Michelle's point of view. She has a very different perspective of how to corral a lot of these things together in her shop versus where you're at, where you have to, we heard all the different titles under your tent, under your umbrella. Jessica, it's very interesting. And Russell, of course, doing work, but for a national-based organization. So we have a really good round cross-section of folks here to talk about this idea of sustainable journalism. Michelle, let me start with you. From your vantage point, you've done a lot of different things around the Southwest, of course, for different news organizations. You've seen this game change a little bit. You've seen it evolve. When you hear that word sustainable journalism, it's an interesting word, sustainable. But what does that mean to you? It's got to be more than just lasting a long time. What does that mean to you?
No, absolutely. I think that journalism is under attack on two fronts right now. To get to it, the first one is the business model, which was touched on in the video. 80% of the advertising money right now is on Facebook and Google. And while those are wonderful platforms and everybody loves the quizzes on there and connecting with your friends, they don't really care if there is sustainable journalism. That is not part of their business model. And that's a threat to what we do at a local level as well as what's happening at a national level. There were some layoffs just this month at BuzzFeed and HuffPost. And so even some of the big digital news providers have suffered because of that business shift. The second area that I think that we're under attack in is a crisis of trust. Never before has journalism been so under assault and under a microscope. And to some extent, maybe we deserve that. I think it peaked with the most recent presidential election. And there's no question that the media did not get that race right. And so we are feeling the effects of that. We're still ranking ahead of congressional members when it comes to trust in recent polls. But I know that the journalists that I work with and the people on this panel, I know all of us are very concerned about that and very concerned about having a newsroom where we discuss these things openly and that we work every day through the body of our work to help dispel that kind of thinking, because we're the boots on the ground in our community. And, we're here to tell people's stories, and we're not bringing an agenda to the process.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well said. Jessica, could you follow up on that as well from your point of view, sort of an overall what sustainability means to you? Because, again, as Tom introduced you, you have a lot of needs to be met out there every day. And I think sometimes assume in rural communities there's sort of a sameness of desire for different types of news things, but I don't believe that. I think you've got a lot more difficult work to do, don't you?
We have just a few, yes, and we agree on those same points, very much so, but I think my perspective differs in that sustainability to me comes down to if you don't have journalists who love and are invested in this profession in a newsroom, then you don't have journalism. So when I think about the question that you just posed, it comes back to how do we engage with those up-and-coming young journalists? How do we teach them to do journalism well, that in a manner that reaches our reader and it elicits that trust? And especially in a small community, there's nothing more difficult than living in the tiny community where you work and going down the Walmart aisle and having to answer for what you just wrote in today's paper. But that requires a professional who is willing to invest in a small community, in the job itself, and to a large extent to this industry that is shifting all the time. So that's where I think my focus has been when it comes to how do we play the journalism game in a new way.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get into some of that with you too, because you're using every tool at your disposal right now where you're at, so I want to get into some of that too. Russell Contreras with the Associated Press. It might be worth explaining just in 20, 30 seconds how the AP works, actually. I find there's a lot of confusion out there about that. Then go ahead and follow up with that sustainability question as well.
Yeah, well, the AP is one of the oldest news organizations in the country. It was started at the Mexican-American War as a way for a cooperative so newspapers can exchange information so we could share it. Today, it is still a wire. It's one of the largest news gathering organizations in the world. We have a bureau here in Albuquerque and in Santa Fe and in El Paso, and we feed not just to our local members, but also a national. So anytime I write a story about New Mexico, if I can get on the national wire, I will. And trust me, it's very easy to get New Mexico stories on the national wire when someone rides an e-scooter and gets a DUI, or steals someone's mother's pasola and gets arrested. I just have to read the police reports, write it up, and the story writes itself. So it's very simple to do.
Is that sustainable, however?
No. No, but on your question of sustainability, and I would piggyback on what has been said, one of the things that I've noticed, and I've worked here in 2004, 2005, and I left, is that this is a great area for stories, for journalism. We have all the mix, the diversity, the poverty, the inequality, everything else that makes good stories. As when we got into this business, it makes you hungry. This is a great training ground for journalists, but unfortunately, this is an area where journalists spend 2 or 3 years and then they move on. If you talk to any of our broadcasts or television stations, they'll tell you that's one of the hardest things, is they come here for 2 or 3 years, they really kick butt, and then they're swallowed up by a national outlet. We've seen it. Our journalists have gone to Boston, to New York, to Los Angeles, to Dallas. They've become big names, and they got to start here. It's good and it's bad. It's good because we give them such tools to become good journalists, but it's hard to build a sustainable model, and it's hard to attract local-grown journalists. Now, why is that? It is because our institutions, our schools, are not training New Mexico-born folks for journalism. We have really good staff in our schools, but the institutions are not given. This school on campus should not be the Communication and Journalism Department. It should be the Ernie Pyle School of Journalism. It should be the Ruben Salazar School of Journalism. It should be the Maria Martin School of Journalism. We should have it separate like that it builds our students, because right now, the Associated Press, we have a global internship program. It's one of the most coveted. The last person to take this internship on and get hired is Susan Montoya Bryan, my colleague. That was in 1996. So when this internship comes up available, the AP, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, we're all in this pressure to diversify, take our candidates away from the East Coast and the West Coast. Let's look at the middle of America, right? But we're not giving them candidates. Arizona State is, the Walter Cronkite School. The University of Arizona is. Missouri is. So when these students come with 2 or 3 internships, compared to our students who may have 1 or none, who are they going to pick? So that is something that we need to have a really hard conversation and to give them the tools so that we can prepare our students, because I want folks to come. I myself came to New Mexico in 2004 and left to the Boston Globe. I came back. That's a rarity. Gene wants to be here. You want to be here. I want to be here. But there are folks that are from here that are invested in the community. We need to get them. It's really hard when I hear a politician or a leader saying, there's no reason for you to go to Missouri, or there's no reason for you to go to Harvard. Let's still here. To me, it angers me. It's like saying, don't buy Florida bananas, buy New Mexico bananas. When we don't grow freaking bananas. Now, we can't change the makeup of our fruit, but we can change the makeup of us growing journalists.
I love that. Yep. You've brilliantly dovetailed into something. Let's just follow up on that, Michelle, if I'll ask you first. Students growing a new a crop of new journalists here in the state. It is a difficulty, as Russell explains it. There are other challenges if you bring it down to even the high school level. If you bring it down to even a level under that, there's work to be done compared to some other communities out there as well. And that's part of sustainability, isn't it?
Absolutely, and he was absolutely right about how we are a great training ground to, one of our top exports is qualified journalists in this state. And if we can retain people here and reap the benefit of their experience here, the quality of what we produce will improve over time. And it starts with our children, and it starts with an ambition and an opportunity in our home state for them to pursue this and see it as a career. We talk about the education crisis that we have in New Mexico, and I would tell you this is just another symptom of that, is that we do not provide in New Mexico, I believe, enough great training. I am guilty of doing exactly what Russell described. I am cherry picking some of the best candidates from the Walter Cronkite School in Arizona and from Missouri. Those are two programs that are pumping out some really well-educated, inspired students, and the result of that is that they get a great background in how to learn the craft here in New Mexico, and then they carry that wisdom with them to the next state that they go to.
Exactly right. The challenges you have in Carlsbad and the surrounding area for that same question. Growing young reporters, internships, all that kind of thing. How challenging is that?
Well, let me divert for a minute here. So I just came from a 4-day workshop with high school journalists. So this is the second year that I've been involved in this program put on by the New Mexico Press Association, and I have to say it was incredible to watch their young minds work through this idea of journalism. What is it? How to engage with it, really get past their high school barriers and start talking to people and asking questions. So it really gave me a lot of hope that maybe, just maybe, we might have put the journalism bug into a couple of these kids, and so we'll have a fresh crop for you guys coming up soon. But to answer your question, we're a really rural community, and the first thing that I tell anybody that I hire to my newsrooms is, we are a training newsroom, whether you're in your first job out of college or your 20th year in journalism. And my main focus is always to ensure that if they are leaving us and going to another newsroom, then they are leaving with a base set of skills that will get them far, to make sure that they are equipped to do the job well, no matter where they are. That being said, would I like to have them stay longer than a year? Most definitely. Would I like to have New Mexico homegrown journalists in my newsrooms? Of course. I can tell you of the hires that I have now, about four came from Michigan and have made New Mexico home. I have a journalist in my Ruidoso newsroom who's been in that community for more than 20 years. That's something you don't see every day. When I first started in journalism, I worked with a woman named Stella Davis, who had been at the Carlsbad Courant-Argus for 36 years. It was incredible, and it was heartbreaking to see her go. But what was even more heartbreaking was to see the number of one-year journalists that followed her. So our biggest challenge is, how do we get a recruit into our newsrooms who are invested in the communities where they're reporting? How do we make them love those rural communities, because there are challenges beyond just, reporting in a small town. There's housing and pay and traffic. We have the 285, you guys, if you're not familiar, it's known as the Highway of Death. Don't let that stop you from visiting us, though. Come down. So I think that if we're going to talk about maintaining a good crop of journalists in our state, we really have to talk about how to make them invest in those areas. I was reading the report earlier, we've got 69 newspapers in the state of New Mexico. How many journalists are employed throughout those 69 newspapers? I can tell you, not enough, and definitely not enough from our state. So smart things to do is to, like Russ said, talk to our programs here in New Mexico that are producing these youth and get them early. Internships, for one, have been a really hard topic for us to do. We can't pay anybody who comes down to Carlsbad. And if anybody knows the cost of living in our part of the state, well, that just doesn't fly. We can't, we don't have things like laptops and cameras, access to larger resources that we're able to train them with so that they're intrigued and they want to come back. I think beyond that, our largest challenge is really getting them networking with others who are at their level and in the same career, so that they can engage with each other.
I could see that. One-on-one, those kind of relationships mean something when someone gets into a community. I'm holding this in my hand because I want to make reference to it. It was part of the focus group, and touching on what Jessica just mentioned, and Russ, I'll turn this to you. New reporter retention was one of the bullet points that folks kind of came up with, and I'll read it off here. Set up programs, i.e. loan repayment, paid fellowships, or new hire bonuses that help financially incentivize new journalism graduates, including those of color, to choose to work in New Mexico. It's an interesting thought. We do this for teachers, we do this for cops, we do this for a lot of different people. Is it appropriate to do this for journalists as well?
I believe so, and I think we have to keep in mind that this is a business model, so there's also a private enterprise, a private entity, and also a public media. For the private thing, we have to work on our business model. Let's be clear, we're really struggling, but there are signs of hope. For example, the Boston Globe, my former employee was using subscribers all over the place when I was there. I was there for 3 years, and we had 3 layoffs. Just recently, they announced they broke a record where their digital subscriptions has surpassed the print. So now they have 100 or 10,000, I believe, digital subscribers. And this has changed after it was sold from the New York Times and bought by the owner of the Boston Red Sox. The LA Times, too, as well, is hiring. So now we're seeing some people who are trying different things and starting to invest. The Berkshire Eagle in Western Mass just has turned their place around by investing in journalists. They were down to 5, now they're back up to 12, reinvesting in print. So we see signs. One of the area that I think that we could affect as citizens is to put pressure on our political leaders and our public entities and our stakeholders to increase the pay of our public media reporters. I mean, think about it. These folks need to deserve a living wage. They need to be on par with folks in Boston. What they were doing is real journalism. It did not deserve to be paid half of what goes on there because they're actually working the same. I would like to see Gene on 5 days a week instead of just on Friday. And on Friday, we have a Beat the Press show like they do in Boston, hosted by Emily Rooney. Right? And not only that, maybe double the brother's pay. That's right. I think he would be happy with that. That's something we could organize. Right. But in an entity, we could also do what like WGBH did in Boston, is put the NPR affiliate and the PBS affiliate in the same building, create an entity. And I think someone could really take that over as an executive director and really change something that we have control of. To change the conversation of of our newsmakers having meetings, this could fundamentally change how news is consumed here in New Mexico. Everybody, we'd all benefit, because that'd be something I'd have to watch, or stations would have to watch, because we would gather news and do follow-ups on this.
That's a good point, please.
I'd like to build on what Russell is saying, because I think the business model is a really big deal in this conversation. I work for KOB. It's a family-owned station. It's one of the last family-owned stations in America. There's been a huge melding of companies so that you just have a few operators with hundreds of stations. And through all of that acquisition, there's been efficiencies that have been realized where they keep paring down the staff and paring down the staff. To build on what you're saying in terms of building a digital audience and finding new consumers of media, that alone won't solve the problem. The layoffs that we're seeing are not the result of bad journalism. They're the result of bad business. And I can say that with confidence because even media outlets that have grown their subscriber base or grown their audience reach are making less money than they ever have before. So if we're serious about recognizing that journalism is an important part of our democracy and being better stewards of our communities, then we got to put our money where our mouth is, and we got to solve the business problem.
Let me ask you a question on that, and this is actually a question for the audience as well. You don't have to shout anything out, just to think about. There's been a school of thought that we sort of blew it in the print journalism business when this all first started, that we all should have gone to a pay model right across the board. Like every public, I hear it. I see your reaction. It's still sort of a thing that's just sort of a controversial. Is the public willing to pay for journalism? That's my fundamental question here.
I'm going to go back to that observation that 80% of the money is now on Facebook and Google. And so there's a perception that I can get this content without paying for it. And I'm going to tell you, you get what you pay for.
That's fair enough. Please, Jessica, pick up on that too. For you, would a pay model, if everybody else was doing it too and it was sort of a fair thing, would that work for you guys as well? Or?
So, for those of you who don't know, all of the papers that I have are Gannett owned. That's the USA Today network. And when we first were purchased by them, we had a very loose paywall. As a reader, you could come onto the website and go through, I think it was 10 articles through the month and get the best news that we produce, right, on a regular basis. And that switched. We went down to 5, and then we went down to 3. And we've tried a few different things, right, very beautiful specials that will give you the best of our digital journalism, all with the thought that we can teach the reader to appreciate the content that we're putting out there more so than you can get anywhere else. Now, readers are pretty savvy. I think is the one thing I've come to conclude is they understand when they're getting good journalism, but does it really matter to them? Have we taught them the value of that? And I think that's an important question to answer before we talk about settling on a business model that embraces just fully digital. Going forward, if we are going to rethink the business model, fully embrace digital, try to teach our readers to appreciate that, I mean, that's where they all are, and let's be honest, that's where our industry is going. It's going to take whoa, did I just lose that? It's going to take a lot more than starting to charge them for the content.
Right. That came up a little bit in the video, and it's also here, Russell, in the idea. The media, I want to talk about this a little bit too, media literacy of the public. Meaning if folks, I don't want to talk down to the public here and say, oh, they don't understand what they're seeing, therefore they can't make a value proposition. Spin that around a little bit. Do we need to do a better job to explain our value proposition as press people to make people want to pay for good journalism? Veteran
journalist Joe Klein said something interesting recently at a talk in Massachusetts where he said, democracy requires citizenship. Citizenship requires a town hall or a town square. That's right. So in order for us, if we are invested in democracy, we need to convey the message that as part of democracy, you need to be informed citizenry. And newspapers, since the revolution on down to today, have been part of that conversation. Now it's not just newspapers, it's broadcast, it's online. So you have to know what you're getting, you have to read what you get paid for. I've seen, as the Associated Press, I read almost all our media outlets and our members, and I see really good journalism out there. But then I'll see people share on Facebook, on Twitter, outlets that are questionable, that don't have the same ethics we do. We have to do things. We write about someone in trouble, we have to give them a chance, he or her, a chance to respond. When you write a story about an accident, you need to confirm the facts. Trust but verify, something the KGB always said. And even though it's the KGB, it's true. If your mother says she loves you, you need to check it out and verify. And I do it all the time, and she thinks I'm insecure. But that's part of what a journalist does. So I think, in terms of that, that's our role, but we don't need to be preachy, because right now, I think there's a disconnect because folks think we're elitist. Yes. We come into a situation where we know it all. And I think it's a confusion what media does and how certain outlets function, whether it's the cable channels or, say, Jess and I going into the scene, that we're not helicoptering in. We usually know the communities which we cover. And we're very interested when I talk to you, I'm not looking at a stereotype. I'm not looking, as one of my colleagues said when he goes out into Tennessee, when they do stories about Appalachia, some of the outlets will go and find the no-teeth person that furthers the stereotypes. And when I was there, that was the one criticism. You always go to the same person, right? Because it feeds into your views. And everybody says, you've interviewed him 4 times, he doesn't even live in our town. He knew there was a story, and he knew he'd show up, and that you would interview him. He has the overall, no shirt. No. You need to check out, and I think we can do a better job of understanding our communities that we cover and do that. And just build a trust, because when I have this conversation today, I'm not making preconceived notions about you. I'm not making assumptions about you. I'm going to talk less and let you talk more. That's what I'm here for. This is not a chance for me to take a selfie with you, but to turn my phone around and take a photo of you. That's right.
Well said. I like that too. The idea that, spin this back to Michelle to start us off on this one. Let's talk about who makes up newsrooms, both print, television, people of color, women. We've got a lot of change going on in our country right now. This business has been under stress for a long time to increase the percentages, and to be honest about it, it really has not moved appreciably over the years, especially when you think about editor level, and it's just a real difficulty. Is this part of the change we need to make to be sustainable, frankly, to have folks from a community that looks like they're from that community, they're reporting on other folks that look like they're from that community? At some point, you got to think this is what folks really, really want at the end of the day.
Sure. I'm really excited to share this platform. Look at the panel that I'm sitting with. This is what it's all about. You need to hold up a mirror and see your community, right? And if it's not your community that's talking to you from the newspaper and from the television, then you might be getting your news from the wrong source. I look at diversity even more broadly than that, Jean. I think the best stories in the editorial process come from all of these different life points. So it's great if you have somebody at the editorial table who's worried about paying off a student loan, and somebody who's worried about saving for retirement. Somebody who's worried about where they're going to put their kids for childcare during the summer when school's out, and somebody who doesn't have children. And we need to make sure that our newsrooms really reflect the people that we're covering. I think of it as being embedded journalists in our community. And in particular, we like to say that we're stakeholders in this. We're raising families here too. There's a reason why we want this state to be a better place to live. And that's why partnering with New Mexico First was really exciting when we talked about our political process, because it's not just enough to talk about the things that are broken in our state. We want to help fix it. We want to do something about it. And isn't it high time that we did more than just report on the problems, but actually hold people accountable for fixing them?
Well, yes, accountability. That's an interesting subject there. Jessica, same question. You're in a different situation, certainly. I have this vision of you, and I love the idea of this young woman down there kicking tail, in this crazy area of our state, you know what I mean? But, being a woman in this situation, and there's going to be more people of color, is this something you're actively looking at when you're looking to hire or bring on, folks into your situation?
Definitely, and I think that when I was first hired as a reporter, I went back to the community where I was born and raised, and you'd be amazed how many doors that opened for me. They're like, hey, Onsurez, right? Yeah, come on in, have a cup of coffee, talk to me. And that made me an ambassador, not only for our industry, but for the larger picture of our community. So the changes that are happening in Carlsbad now, we've got a population boom thanks to the oil and gas industry. And that means that we have started to look at, okay, how do we represent that in our reporting? Is it more than just those who have, a toehold, a foothold in our community? Now it's looking larger. We have to take a moment and step back and say, what are the stories that we're not telling because we're so focused on this traditional view of our community, not only in Carlsbad, but in Alamogordo and Ruidoso as well. When I look to hire, I'm definitely looking for that. I'm looking for someone who loves the idea of journalism, certainly, but who can represent the larger viewpoints, as was well said by my colleague to the side. And more than that, can help explain them. So if there's anything about a growing community that I know, it's just how divisive some of those items can be. So the voice that says, as you said, hold them accountable, but yes, bring them together and recreate the sense of community is ultimately very important in any person I hire.
Good point there. Russell, let me add another layer to this for your bit as well, and you guys jump in on this as well. The idea of, can we truly serve New Mexicans fully if we don't have much in the Spanish language? Either in print, television, radio, that kind of thing. Are we coming up short there? And again, under the idea of sustainability, do we need to do better with that in order to be more sustainable in the future?
Historically, this was a place that was so important to Spanish language newspapers, but right now we almost have none that report on, that isn't celebrity news, that say, doesn't put Chiquita on the front, and then tease you with some news, but then have something that is not relevant to, say, New Mexico. We also used to have outlets that were based here in New Mexico covering, but right now some of the work is done out of Denver. So this is an area where you'll have one of the major outlets and covering the state with the largest percent of Hispanics, not in state. So that's a result of a business model, but also something, the idea that Spanish language doesn't mean much. And if we know in certain aspects, like we talked to an editor out in Roswell, she started a Spanish language paper, or a Spanish language page, and there is a reaction to that, both positive and negative. I would say that to also look at the stats about what the demographics are and how they've changed. According to our various surveys, today, only 5.6% of our newsrooms are people who are Latino, who identify as Latino. That's 5.6. That means 94% of our newsrooms are non-Latino, at a time when it's the largest minority group in the United States. This has not moved. And I think that's because as newspapers struggle with their model, they have cut back on diversity programs. They used to. Now they see that as an extra side. It's kind of a extracurricular activity. But that is fundamental to understanding our society. We must be more reflective of our society. I have said this in every media organization I've worked for, every place that I've been. I've always stressed, and what I've seen in our public sector is sometimes these entities are more diverse than the areas that are supposed to be covering them. And that's something that we have to be vigilant on. I invest in that because it's something so, yes, it affects me, but I also take it a step further. I'm not just here to recruit Latinos. I'm here to recruit LGBT, Muslim American journalists, because my family, we were once strangers in the land of the United States. We have an obligation, just as people opened up doors for us in Houston, Texas, it was Jewish Americans. I think we need to continue that and press it forward. And it's not just in just the newsroom, but every aspect there, technology, our sports, all that needs to change because that creates what the narrative of the country is.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick reminder, I don't see Tom. Oh, there's Tom. If I can get a time check from you when you feel like the Q&A should start. And good deal, gotcha. And just a reminder, you have all the cards already as well, or is that still being, okay, good deal, sorry. Taking care of a little business there, my fault. Let's talk about new things. I want to start, Jessica, with you on that. Alternative journalism is an interesting term that's out there. And it's almost like alternative oxygen. Like, I don't know what that actually...
Alternative facts.
Right, exactly.
Breathing underwater.
Right, exactly. And so I wonder sometimes, can it really be that alternative journalism, or are we saying that folks need another avenue to walk into the idea of journalism, something that meets them halfway? What's your sense of that?
Halfway. I think, so it's an interesting question because alternative journalism, it's really kind of undefined, right? What are we talking about? Are we talking about spending 20 hours gathering information and then putting it all into a quick little infographic that gives you the high points and letting that educate our public? Or are we talking about using video and photography in ways that we traditionally use print journalism? To me, it's a little bit of that, but it's also kind of broader. So One of the interesting things that we're trying with this particular term is, instead of writing, photographing, or taking video of a story, let's talk to our community about it. So we're opening our newsroom with these engagement events, and we're bringing our public in, and instead of putting it in a format that they consume and then just throw away or never come back to again, we're inviting them in to have a conversation about the journalism that we do. So engagement is extremely important, and I think is probably the way to lead when we're talking about alternative journalism. But I'm also think in the very same manner that it's, yes, about leading them to our journalism from a different path. You know, our small communities are very wedded to their print newspapers. I can't tell you, if the paper doesn't show up on somebody's front door one morning, the number of calls I'll get from that single person. Is it going to be here? Are you going to deliver it? Where can I get a copy? You know, this is the third time. So they're very wedded to traditional journalism, and that involves teaching them that there's better ways to do that. So this is the story that I always share, which is for a while we didn't have a sports reporter, and I got a group of 8 older gentlemen come into the office and say, we want to talk to the editor right now. Oh, it was a little intimidating. It was my first year as an editor, and let me just say, I almost wanted to run out the back door. I held my ground. So I sat them down, and they laid out their problems, and they said, you know, you haven't had local sports in our newspaper. We want our local sports. We want to see our high school kids, et cetera, et cetera. And I said all of the right things and reassured them we were trying to fill that position. And at the end of the conversation, I said, well, gentlemen, can I ask you, how many of you have gone to our website, because we were publishing things there to get the news that you want? No, we don't want to do that. And I said, well, how many of you use your phones? No, we don't think our phones work that way. I said, well, may I see them? And every single one of those gentlemen whipped out a smartphone, an iPhone. And I said, you know, that little tool in your hand, that's something very beautiful when it comes to what we do and how we do it. So it's also, I think, a question of who are we trying to reach? Are we teaching them the way to get to the journalism that we're trying to produce? And to your question, we have done something that I think is a little different, right? We've partnered with you guys on a series in housing in Carlsbad, and we led them to our journalism through New Mexico in Focus, which is a broadcast. So I think that there's a way to look at alternative journalism and partnerships and engagement in a broader view that talks about the best ways to get the information to the public that we're trying to get.
Terrifically done. Thank you for stating that. Tom Garrity, thank you for coming back. Hello there. You have some questions you're going to read that you have submitted to Tom, and
we have like 20 quesestions.
Oh,
and it's
wow.
not 20 questions the game, but we literally have about 20 questions.
It's a fun game.
So
it's too bad.
Instead of me picking one, go ahead and pick a number between 1 and 9.
8.
8. All right. Question number 8 is, Salt Lake City's newspaper announced plans to become a nonprofit organization. Is the public better served when news is seen as a public service rather than a consumer product?
That's a great question. Michelle, can I ask you to tackle that one first? Yeah.
I think news is always a public service. I'm going to say that. I got to start with that. And with broadcasting in particular, we have a license from the federal government that requires us, it's our mission, our duty, our charge to perform a public service. So just to share an anecdote with you, we have a tornado in southeastern New Mexico, and we're doing cut-ins, not because we're going to make money off of that, right? But because people's lives are in danger and we need to tell them about that. And of course, people are complaining because you're interrupting whatever prime time there is. And by the way, the money is on the prime time. So I think we proved that we're a public service all the time. I think that that's steeped in the tradition of what we've been doing for a long time. So I look at that as a perception problem. If it makes sense for them to be a nonprofit because it will allow them to invest more of the money in their people and not worry about shareholders, that's terrific. I'm lucky I don't have to worry about shareholders either because I work for a family. But I would say that if you are in the news business, it starts with public service. That's just the price of admission.
Jessica, if you could, on that, it's a trust issue, isn't it? Some folks, they trust the nonprofit model more, and
some don't.
Right, there's that sense of they're unbiased, they have a neutral position, they don't work for a large, scary corporation like Gannett, who does answer to shareholders, which is something that we run up against every single time. But we are a public service, as you said, but I don't think that there's ever been a moment when people haven't been expected to pay in one way or another for news. And that's the conversation that I have with people who, are wondering why the price of their newsprint has gone up, why they're paying $20 more every year for a product they say holds less and less. And the emphasis for us is we try to do quality journalism that is worth the amount that they're paying, whether you're getting it in print, digital form. And it's intriguing to think about nonprofit as a model for journalism, because it does hold that idea of we would trust that neutral party more. But again, that falls back on us. Are we doing the legwork that tells our communities that we're serving that we are unbiased, that we're here for you, that it's not about the clicks and the headline bait, that it's about informing you about things that impact your everyday life for you to make smart decisions for you and your families?
Russell, what do you think?
Well, the Associated Press is a nonprofit, one of the oldest in the country, so it hits home to us. But just to keep in mind, even though we're a nonprofit, we still have cost. I'm a member of the union. The cost for paying labor is high. I want to get paid. I've got 2 young girls. I want them to go to college. So that's, as a reporter, that's non-negotiable. Even as a nonprofit, you're going to have the same pressures that private enterprise have. But you have a lot of nonprofit news organizations around the country, the Center for Public Integrity, ProPublica. In New Mexico, I believe there's one run by a guy named Tripp. He also runs one. So these are models that have existed and are starting to take off. This was interesting about Utah because it's one of the major media outlets taking this on. There have been attempts, I'm thinking of the St. Petersburg newspaper too as well, that's run by Pointer, but they too have been facing business challenges too. So it's not the answer to everything, although it is one intriguing, and I think if one is invested in that, you must also contribute to your local NPR and PBS affiliate too, because they get a lot of their funding from viewers like you. And I'm saying that not as a member of PBS. Well, I am a member, but I'm not an employee. And I think those exist, and again, you get what you paid for, because these organizations are always scrounging for money. So even if you were to create this nonprofit, can a community support it? And if it is there, it needs to be supported in order to grow and hire quality journalists.
You remind me, I believe it was San Diego, there was a really interesting effort some years ago. Came out great gangbusters, a lot of ex-journos in the market put something together, but then it started to tail off a little bit. It was sort of a frustrating thing. I know in Texas there's been some models like this as well, and we mentioned Tripp as well. He's done a great effort here in New Mexico with this. And so this idea of nonprofit, I think it's still the tale still needs to be told, so to speak. We're not quite sure how that's going to be appealing or not.
All right, we have, it's like fitting 10 pounds of sausage into a 5-pound bag. We've got a lightning round here. We have
Love
two
it.
questions that I think is great. We have a number of topics on fake news and editorial process. So on fake news, how do you teach children to tell the difference between real and fake news?
Who wants to take that one? That's a good one.
I take newspapers to the elementary schools, and I sit there and I read with them, and I tell them this was created by someone in your community, talking to real people in your community, and then I take those same editions and I take them to the teachers so the teachers can carry on that tradition for us. But you got to get them young, guys. You got to get them young. But more importantly, you've got to teach them to be discerning consumers of news, and that comes. That does in part come from us, but it comes from the family setting as well and the community setting as well. So we have taken on partnerships with our school districts, with the Boys and Girls Club, with every organization you can imagine to be able to kind of bridge that gap. And through those organizations, reach the younger consumers of news. I don't want to say we've given up on the older consumers of news, but they're much more hard-headed.
I'm always struck by how people will say fake news on both sides, and they'll point to the one that doesn't fit their worldview. And so at some point, we're just going to have to get past that label. And it may even be a situation where we have to teach literacy for journalism, because there is so much out there that is clouding the water and making it difficult to see the true work that people are doing to deliver the best quality, verified, researched, checked news to people every day.
So is there a way to badge stories that, this is a verified, factually true story, so consumers know there's through some association, some organization, you know what I mean? This idea's been out there for a while, but it's never really stuck.
Yeah, I think a lot of us has to be transparent when if we ever, and I very seldom use unnamed sources. You have to put why the person is unnamed, right? This person's unnamed because they're close to the administration and did not get clarification or did not get the okay to speak on such and such. Or this person is a former member of the administration, or whatever the case. We have to be transparent as much as we can on how we gather the facts. We also have to be transparent when we make corrections. So one of the things we've done is when we make corrections, instead of putting in an eds note that only say the journalist or a media outlet will see, we put something at the bottom. This story corrects a previous version that said the heavyweight champion in 1996 was so-and-so, not so-and-so. And be as transparent as possible. In some cases, media outlets cross over the the incorrect facts and put in the correct. Now, there's a difference between getting something wrong and just making up stuff. And I think we have to be very clear that our outlets, we're doing the best to be as accurate as possible. When we make mistakes and they happen, we have to be transparent on what happened. Were we given wrong information? Did we mishear somebody? Did we just make a mistake and misspell someone's name? Even if something is dropping an L on a name of an organization, we need to be clear on that. And in terms of teaching kids, look, I have a 5-year-old. She thinks JoJo Seawall, the YouTube star, is doing the same thing I'm doing. And I have to say, no, she dumps slime on herself, and I go and gather news, and this is what I do. So I've started that young, and finally she says this, but unfortunately, when I'm on the show with Jean, when I say we're going to watch the PBS NewsHour, she sees that as punishment. And I was like, no, you have to watch. Now, the last time I did that, the 2-year-old walked up to the television and tried to swipe it. Because she thought she could change the channel that way. The idea of something going live or tape did not register with her. And I realized I have work to do. So when she was swiping my face, then she tried to swipe Jean's face. She then hit the television and said, this click is not working. I'm like, this is television. But I'm just showing you that the technologies are changing the way we're consuming things, and it's already hit the next generation. And they've already created their own world in their minds, and it's something we have to address.
Can I add to that? So the big banners in southeast New Mexico, Alamogordo, Ruidoso, Carlsbad, one of the things that I found is that they have people who read those have certain expectations, and they want to see one-on-one. And so I think it's more than just putting that editor's note at the bottom. The transparency is great, the willingness to acknowledge that we're human and we make mistakes, but it's also about talking to those readers about why that mistake happened, what we're doing to correct it, talking about those ethics and those standards that we hold very near and dear to our hearts, in a manner that they can understand, and saying, hey, anytime that you want to have this conversation again, or anyone else you know who wants to have this conversation, send them to me. I'm willing to talk about it.
Wow, what a fantastic conversation. We have so many more questions, but what I'm going to ask to do is maybe what we can do is we did some podcasts before the event, and where we have a lot of great insight from all of our panelists. I'm going to ask, and I'm going to put you all on the spot, is if maybe we divide these questions up and then get your responses over Skype, and then we'll post them to the NewMexicoFirst.org website. How does that sound?
Yeah, I'm in.
Folks,
Yeah,
let's just give them a great hand. All right, thank you very much. Well, as we get ready to move to the awards portion of tonight's program, I want to be able to draw attention to something in your, in your program. It's a little something that looks like this. And it's really fascinating because, I have two. Isn't that kind of cool? It's like a magic trick. But actually, there is a... I just went silent. No. But what we're going to do is we'd like to do a New Mexico First. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to go ahead and write your information, your contact information on here. Now you're going to find out 5 of you are pretty shocked and surprised about right now. And those 5 of you actually are participating unknowingly in a test project by the Garrity Group. And this is called the Take 5, Give 5. So there are 5 envelopes in here that actually have a $5 bill provided. I know, now everybody's looking inside the booklet, right? And so what you have the chance to do is if you want to be able to give $5 or use the $5, pay parking, tip someone, pay it forward, it's up to you. But anyway, it's just kind of our way to kind of get you engaged. If you want to be able to double that to $10 and give it to New Mexico First, that's definitely encouraged as well. So as you're filling those out, I'd like to thank our sponsors. And our sponsors include notable newspaper sponsors, which is P&M and El Paso Electric. Outstanding online coverage sponsors include Concho Resources, U.S. Bank, the Thornburg Foundation, and the Garrity Group. Remarkable radio sponsors include Con Alma Foundation, Molson Corbin Engineers, Architects and Planners, AT&T, and Los Alamos National Laboratory. And now to the awards. Tonight we applaud 7 individuals for their dedication to working together and towards excellence in their profession. New Mexico First Board Member, former New Mexico Senator Cynthia Nava, will now tell us about how tonight's honorees were selected. Cynthia?
Thank you. Good evening. Our Spirit Awards Committee was tasked with the job of selecting awardees in 3 distinct categories: lawmaking, civic leadership, and our new category this year, excellence in journalism. We received many impressive nominations, and so tonight's nominees are here because they demonstrate continued commitment to moving New Mexico forward. These values are the cornerstone of New Mexico First mission. We are thrilled to recognize leaders who share and live these values. Before we name tonight's winners, on page 7 of your program, it shows previous winners, and anyone who is here who is a previous awardee, would you please stand and be recognized? Are there any? I am. I think I was one of the first ones, and I think I've been on this committee ever since then. But anyway, and so I also would like to thank the committee that helped do this hard work: Terry Nicole Baca, Rob Black, John Garcia, Rico Gonzalez, and Clinton Harden. Seriously, I am humbled by the realization that so many New Mexicans work so hard every day to make New Mexico better. And so tonight, we honor just a few of them.
I would like to introduce the presenter of our first award. I'd like to ask Franz Joachim of New Mexico PBS and fellow New Mexico First Board Member to join us. He's going to present our first Spirit Award. Franz?
Thank you very much, Tom. I am thrilled to honor Trip Jennings, Executive Director of New Mexico in Depth, with our Spirit of Excellence in Journalism Award. Trip Jennings is a longtime newspaper alum who has worked in Georgia, California, Florida, Connecticut, and New Mexico. He has reported on everything from government corruption and the changing face of healthcare in America to the influence of money in politics, all that before co-founding New Mexico in Depth in 2012. New Mexico in Depth is an investigative, data-driven nonprofit media outlet. I love the nonprofit part. No offense, Michelle, but I just have to. That's right. In particular, New Mexico in Depth is focused on government, how money influences the making and implementation of laws and regulations, and how implementation of these rules affects the lived realities of New Mexicans, especially the state's low-income communities, and sometimes how that perpetuates the inequities in education and the criminal justice systems. Tripp grew up in Georgia in the 60s and 70s, a time and place that taught him the power of the question, Why are things the way they are? And the discomfort that that question sometimes causes people in power. It also made him mindful that the stories about individuals, while fun and interesting, only go so deep. Looking at systems and institutions reveal much more about the world in which we live than the stories about individual wrongdoers. Congratulations, Tripp. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you, Tripp and Franz. And now I would like to introduce former Lieutenant Governor Diane Dennish to the stage as she'll welcome our next Spirit Award. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome everybody, and thank you for being here tonight, and congratulations to every one of the award winners. So I'm here tonight to help honor my friend Catherine Freeman, who is the president and CEO of United Way of Santa Fe County, as well as the Early Childhood Development Partnership. With Catherine's visionary and thoughtful leadership, early education and care has been the focus of United Way of Santa Fe County for the past 15 years. And I'm so pleased that some of her board members have joined tonight. There's so many friends of Catherine Freeman that aren't on this board that are proud of the fact that she's getting this honor. My early association with Catherine Freeman began about the same time, 15 years ago, when I read a very small brief in the Santa Fe New Mexican about this woman who had said to Santa Fe County United Way, we need to focus our resources for impact. And that impact was early education and care, the first 5 years. After a brief phone call, we began to work together to pass New Mexico's 4-year-old Pre-K Act. But Catherine's work is so much broader than that little bit of work we did together in the beginning. With a very small budget, she led the development of United Way of Santa Fe County's continuum of early childhood services, focusing on the 2-generation approach to early childhood and family services. Today, those programs serve 3,500 families in Santa Fe County. In the true sense of this award, civic engagement, combined with Catherine's leadership, United Way of Santa Fe County has partnered with the Santa Fe Public Schools, Presbyterian Medical Services, Christus St. Vincent Medical Center, Santa Fe Community College, and so many more entities in Santa Fe County. In partnership with Santa Fe Public Schools, United Way opened the Early Learning Center at Agua Fria, and in 2017, the board decided, and under Catherine's leadership, took a very bold move. They purchased and remodeled Kearney Elementary School to become the United Way Early Learning Center at Kearney, which opened last fall with 3- and 4-year-old classrooms. But to further the community's engagement in the early childhood conversation, and as an additional piece of United Way's work, Catherine helped create and has led the Early Childhood Development Partnership in creating smart policy and advocacy for early childhood that engages educators, providers, business leaders, and policymakers. The partnership in 2019 gathered a diverse coalition of those same people, and we included community activists and others to help gain bipartisan, across the board, very few no votes, to pass Senate Bill 22, sponsored by Senator Michael Padilla, creating, finally, an early education and care department. That bill was signed by Governor Lujan Grisham on March 14th. So finally, we can say that the first 5 years will no longer be a stepchild shuffled between departments, but will have the focus and the resources to give New Mexico kids a healthy start. Catherine embodies the spirit of coalition building, civic engagement, and bipartisanship that this award honors. That spirit, in this case, will have a long-lasting impact on the families of Santa Fe County and now on the children of families across New Mexico. Congratulations, Catherine.
All right, thank you very much, Catherine and Diane. Next, I would like to introduce Terry Nicole Baca. Terry Nicole Baca of AT&T New Mexico, who is also one of our board members. Terry Nicole will present our next Spirit Award. Terry Nicole, take it away.
Thank you. I'm here tonight to honor the staff of KOB TV4 News with our Spirit of Civic Engagement Award. KOB TV4 was New Mexico's first television station when it began broadcasting its signal in 1948. KOB's 71 years of operation in itself merits recognition, not to mention their demonstrated journalistic excellence. But what prompts KOB's recognition among New Mexico First Spirit Awards tonight is KOB's recent partnerships with New Mexico First to engage state residents in meaningful, deliberative democracy. In 2017, in the lead up to the election in Albuquerque's mayor's race, KOB conceived of hosting town halls to generate questions for candidates participating in a debate. Along with New Mexico First, KOB hosted 4 simultaneous town halls in different regions of the city to represent the greatest geographical diversity. Not only did this leave town hall participants with a greater understanding of various aspects of democracy and the media's role, it allowed for a more genuine and in-depth look at what Albuquerque residents cared about in the mayor's race. Due to the success of the town hall-style mayoral debate in Albuquerque, KOB decided to work again with New Mexico First to produce a gubernatorial debate in 2018 using a similar collaborative format. This showed once again that KOB was open to innovation, civic engagement, and the progress of democratic education. The gubernatorial debate town halls brought together citizens from Roswell, Espanola, and Albuquerque to design debate questions through deliberation. While we have great admiration and gratitude for KOB's coverage of local, state, and national news through its 70-plus years of broadcasting, KOB's recent efforts to advance cooperation, inquiry, community, and democracy through our collaborative town halls are why we wish to recognize KOB for civic leadership. So Tim and Michelle, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Terry Nicole, and congratulations to KOB TV. Our next I would like to introduce my neighbor, as well as New Mexico First board member, John Garcia with the Central New Mexico Home Builders Association.
Thank you, Tom. I agreed to do this because Rebecca said I could use her heels to take the picture later. I like following the governor because they don't have to change the podium. Bipartisanship is the art of opposing political parties finding common ground. It requires excellent communication skills, compromise, and diplomacy. Those who excel are true statesmen, or in this case, stateswomen. On behalf of the Home Builders Association of Central New Mexico, it gives me great pleasure to honor New Mexico Representative Rebecca Dow for this year's Spirit of Bipartisanship Award. As a member of the New Mexico House of Representatives, Rebecca Dow says she inspires to be a voice for families, the local community, and common sense governance. During her time representing residents of Grant, Hidalgo, and Sierra counties in the 38th House District, Rebecca founded Early Childhood Caucus, and she is a founding member of the recently formed New Mexico Women's Caucus, which pushes for reforms that can help women, children, and families. Rebecca is also currently serves on the legislature's Commerce and Economic Development Committee and the House Education Committee. Rebecca's golden rule of bipartisan says that there is no room for holding grudges or political posturing. When you find an area of agreement, she says, you dive all in regardless of who gets the credit. Rebecca is the founder and director of Apple Tree Educational Center, one of Sierra County's largest employers. Apple Tree provides care and education services from early pre-K to college and career preparation services for youth and adults, home visiting, and comprehensive family support services. Rebecca says, and I quote, "So many social issues we face in New Mexico are tied to poverty and hopelessness. Children do not choose their circumstances, yet these circumstances often determine their future ability to become productive citizens. Focusing on early childhood development is an economic development strategy," end quote. With that philosophy and approach, Rebecca has served on various commissions, councils, and task forces for both Democrat and Republican governors. Among her many distinctions, Rebecca is the recipient of the 2008 Governor's Award for Outstanding New Mexico Women, and Appletree has received numerous awards of excellence. In addition to Appletree, Rebecca and her husband, Aaron, own Dow Technology, a multifaceted technology firm. Rebecca says her favorite topic when collaborating with colleagues from the other side of the aisle is rules and regulations for a number of reasons. By working on rules and regulations, there is usually a solution that doesn't require waiting until the next legislative session to pass a bill. And the impact of improving rules and regulations can be felt statewide in the day-to-day lives of both state employees and the citizens they serve. Rebecca and her husband have 2 children, Jayla and Seth. Tonight, we honor a true stateswoman, Representative Rebecca Dow. It's in my contract.
Congratulations, Representative Dow, and thank you very much, John. Oh, you bet. And now, New Mexico First Board Member Rico Gonzalez will join us from El Paso Electric to announce our next Spirit Award.
Thank you, Tom. On behalf of El Paso Electric, it is a great honor to present Senator Clemente Sanchez as this year's Spirit of Bipartisanship Award. And I quote, "Elections are partisan, but when the election is over, it is time to govern, and that means working with the other side of the aisle and the executive branch of government. It's when compromise and pragmatism come together that government delivers tangible results for New Mexicans." And that's a quote from Senator Sanchez. And that's exactly what bipartisanship is, and that is what Senator Sanchez is. But who is he? He is the youngest child of 13 who was raised by a single father after Senator Sanchez's mother passed away when he was 8. His mentors are Joe Fidel, who, if you know Senator Sanchez, comes into conversations when he's talking about real government, and his father, Jose Sanchez, who showed him hard work and dedication. And he's also a family man. Senator Sanchez is married to Georgia, who is a member of the Acoma Pueblo, and have been married for almost 43 years. And that's in 2 weeks that it's 43 years. So I think we should give them a round of applause for that. They have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. They live in Grants, New Mexico, as well as on the Pueblo of Acoma, where they have a family home. Now, what are we here to acknowledge? Well, his work in the community is on numerous boards and committees. He is a member of the Legislative Finance Committee, Legislative Council, Revenue Stabilization and Tax Policy Committee, all hardworking and can put you to sleep, but not this man. He works through it. He is also our chair of the Senate Corporations and Transportation Committee. This committee vets legislation affecting business climate and economic well-being of our state. And as the chairman, he ensures balance among competing interests is one way in which Senator Sanchez, I can't call you Clemente, I just can't do it, has become known for compromise and pragmatism. And this year was a big year on that end. During the 2019 legislative session, Senator Sanchez was instrumental in passing New Mexico's new minimum wage law, which moves wages to at least $12 per hour by 2023. Senator Sanchez led bipartisan and bicameral negotiations to get the bill across the finish line. And one other piece that offers the evidence of the bipartisanship was a tax reform bill that included an income tax exemption for low and middle class taxpayers who were hit with a state tax increase after the federal tax reform bill of 2017. And on a personal note, there isn't another chairperson who will sit there and listen as much as Senator Sanchez, Chairman Sanchez does, as we move through the process on that Senate side, and I just appreciate that from you. So let's give a round of applause for Senator Sanchez.
Yep. Before we present our final award tonight, the Lifetime Achievement Award, I'd like to invite Dr. Valerie Romero-Leggott with UNM Health Services Center, whom you met earlier this evening, and Deputy County Manager for Bernalillo County, Vince Murphy. And if you could help me welcome them, they have a special announcement tonight.
So thank you, Tom. It's been my honor to serve as chair and work with Heather twice now, quite an honor. And it's not often in our lives that we have the opportunity and the privilege to work with someone like Heather. She embodies an amazing convergence of innovative, visionary thinking. She's also detailed-oriented, reality-based, and has common sense. Like, that is like so wonderful. I love that. So thank you, Heather, for that. I love her sense of humor, her unparalleled work ethic, and her way with people, both in groups and one-on-one. She shares her knowledge with authenticity, civility, and transparency. She's such a good person, and in New Mexico's terms, she's muy buena gente. Thank you, Heather. So during Heather's tenure, the organization influenced dozens of laws and appropriations in education, healthcare, natural resources, and good government. Examples include expansion of scholarships for non-traditional college students, expanded watershed restoration and state water planning, the passage of the constitutional amendment to create the State Ethics Commission, loan repayment incentives to keep medical students here in New Mexico, as well as multiple conventional and renewable energy reforms. So this award is one special way that the people and the state of New Mexico can recognize and show our heartfelt gratitude for the incredible leadership, inspiration, and legacy of a better New Mexico that one of New Mexico's own, from Portales, New Mexico, one of our own, has brought to all of us. So thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Valerie. So I thought I was here to talk about the toughest boss I've ever had in my entire career. I had the privilege of being a chair when Heather was first hired by New Mexico First. And I've just got to tell you, I'm going to not necessarily follow what's been written here, and that's when I get in trouble. But we are just so lucky. I got to be involved with New Mexico First in the early times with Senator Bingaman and joining Senator Domenici. And I really made an error when I was the board chair. I disagreed with Heather related to sponsoring the debates. I thought we were getting too involved in the political process, and I was the only vote against that, and apologized many times since. So the model she has built in New Mexico First to bring parties together works time and time again. And so on behalf of New Mexico First Board of Directors, we present Heather with this engraved non-bay vase for 14 years of bipartisan service, which reads, Bipartisan Service Award in grateful appreciation to Heather W. Ballas, President and Executive Director, 2005 to 2019. Let's all give Heather a round of applause.
Outstanding. Congratulations, Heather, and thank you very much, Valerie and Vince, for the special award presentation. Please welcome Siri Yamada with P&M. She will be presenting tonight's final Spirit Award. Welcome, Siri.
Thank you, Tom. I'm really delighted to be here today. It is a pleasure to be able to introduce and present the Lifetime Achievement Award to our Senator, Tom Udall. Senator Udall has earned a reputation as a principled leader who has the integrity to do the right thing for New Mexico and our nation. The senator began serving as U.S. State Senator in 2009 after 2 decades of public service as U.S. Representative and New Mexico State Attorney General. He was reelected to the U.S. Senate in 2014 and is now New Mexico's senior senator. Senator Udall's roots are in New Mexico are deep. His grandmother was born in Luna, New Mexico during the territorial days and was part of the ranching family that is now Catron County. The senator earned his undergrad degree in Preston College and obtained a bachelor's of law degree from Cambridge University in 1975. He graduated from the University of New Mexico Law School, and he served as a law clerk to Chief Justice Oliver Seth in the U.S. 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and became a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Criminal Division. These experiences helped the Senator Udall realize he could personally make a difference for the people of New Mexico and our nation. The senator was elected as New Mexico's Attorney General. He made fighting DWI and domestic violence a priority. And working with the legislature on both sides of the aisle, he pushed for tougher laws against offenders. He fought to protect consumers, especially senior citizens, and he made ethics a trademark issue, increasing transparency in government. In 1998, Senator Udall was elected to represent the 3rd Congressional District of New Mexico in the U.S. House of Representatives. In the House, he wrote and passed legislation establishing the National Renewable Electric Standard, which would spur the creation of good jobs reinvigorating our economy and reducing global warming emissions. While in the House, Senator Udall co-founded the Congressional International Conservation Caucus, which is now the second largest caucus in the U.S. Congress, and he serves as the co-chair of the caucus in the Senate. Senator Martin Heinrich would also like to share a few words in honor of Senator Udall's service to New Mexico.
Hello, and welcome to the latest New Mexico First Forum. I wish I could be there with you as New Mexico First once again helps us think through the greatest opportunities and challenges that our state faces.
This sort of thing never happens. Ever.
At a time when our president continues to label the media as an enemy of the people, I think it's more important than ever to recognize the importance of a functioning free press in our constitutional democracy. I'm also proud of all of this year's Spirit Award winners. But I wanted to especially commend this year's Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Tom Udall has been an invaluable friend, a mentor, and colleague in the United States Senate. Over his decades-long career working for the people of New Mexico, Senator Udall has shown what it means to be a true public servant. Everyone who knows Tom Udall knows that he will never stop fighting for what he believes in. Tom is a steadfast champion for New Mexico and staunch defender of our American values. By building strong relationships, but never backing down from his principles, he has built an incredible record of accomplishments. I am proud to continue learning from his principled leadership. We will keep working with each other in the Senate over the next year to advance policies to move New Mexico and our nation forward. And I am certain both Tom and Jill will keep fighting for New Mexico in this upcoming new chapter in their lives.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. Unfortunately, Senator Udall was unable to be here in person this evening. However, he has sent a video so we may hear his reflection on receiving this honor.
Thank you, New Mexico First, for this great honor. Thank you to the Board of Directors, to my fellow co-chair, Senator Heinrich, to Senators Bingaman and the late Senator Domenici for their trailblazing work. And to everyone in this room, thank you for your partnership. Together, we have always worked to put the people of New Mexico first. As a result, we've accomplished so much for this state that we love and for the people who call it home. New Mexico First has been my mantra in Congress. On the Appropriations Committee, I've fought to secure record investments in our communities and our workforce, to make sure our children can stay in New Mexico and raise their own families here. Achieving that goal requires an innovative approach to policymaking. It requires us working together. This organization preaches the power of consensus, of cooperation, of seeing the best in one another. And that's the approach I've taken, even in these divisive times. As my Uncle Mo often said, we can disagree without being disagreeable, and that we need to work together whenever we can. Against the odds, we've had success. We've found common ground even where it seemed impossible. A few years ago, I proudly led the reform of our nation's badly broken chemical safety program. It was the first major rewrite of our chemical safety laws in 40 years, a bipartisan landmark achievement. A lot of people said it couldn't be done, but we got it done because we shared a common purpose and we didn't waver. So progress is hard, but it's possible. And yet there's no denying that we live in historically divisive times. We are facing real crises that threaten the very foundation of our state and nation. A planet in peril, endless wars, and a democracy that has reached a crisis point. These are the defining issues of our time. I'm doing everything in my power to tackle them head on, and I'm counting on all of you to be with me in this fight. Above all, we need to restore the strength of our democracy, to end the reign of special interest, and to give power back to the people. That's the only way we'll achieve the progress that we need and deserve. That's why I've introduced the For the People Act, sweeping reforms to put the people back in charge. But I need your help to get it over the finish line. The only way we'll get this done is if we once again build consensus, even where it might seem impossible. We need to come together as New Mexicans, as Americans, as members of the global community, to transcend our divisions and to put the people first. Thank you again for this special honor. I am incredibly touched to receive your Lifetime Achievement Award. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, Senator Udall, thank you so much for your commitment and collaboration and making us stronger in New Mexico. And here today to accept this award on his behalf is Greg Bloom, the State Director of New Mexico.
All right, thank you very much, Sayuri Yamada with Public Service Company of New Mexico, PNM. It's been a fantastic evening, and what I'd like to do is welcome Pamela Blackwell back to this microphone. See, you're already there, to basically take us all the way home. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Udall and Sayuri, for your efforts to strengthen our state. And thank you, Tom, for your commitment to New Mexico first. Lastly, thank you to all of you for sharing your evening with us. Please take a moment, if you have not already, and use that envelope and share your contact information with us. And if you'd like to contribute to support our work, we welcome that as well. So to share this event with others, please feel free to check out our NewMexicoFirst.org website, where you will see the New Mexico PBS has taped tonight's event as well. So in the coming months, we urge you to join us in building a healthy, engaged citizenry, an effective policy that will make New Mexico first. Please be safe going home, and good night.